Welcome to this week's Bitshares DEV Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all Bitshares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our Hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the Bitshares Eco System and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Welcome to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today is Friday, April 25th, 2015. Our conversation today did not take on the usual format, though we did cover some updates. Bytemaster was more interested in our thoughts on changing the foundations of Bitshares by scrapping the changes to the current dilutionary delegate system to return to the original, purely dilutionary chain. If you would like to tell us how you feel about this, please visit beyondbitcoin.org and give us a response via the poll we have posted. We hope you enjoy our Hangouts and look forward to seeing your responses on today's topic. Would you like to get started with your update, Bytemaster?
We've got a lot of stuff going on. For those of you who don't know, we just released Bitshares 0.9, and that solves all of the market issues that we've had. It introduces the advanced user-issued asset features with whitelists. There's some documentation on GitHub for how to use those features. It finally has all the stuff we've been talking about for the past 4 months. It's finally made it into the Bitshares blockchain. And this would have been very close to 1.0 if we hadn't invented BitAssets 3.0, which are game-changing enough that I don't want to lock down the protocol yet. So that's where we are on that. Check out the latest wallet. I believe there's also a new market interface in the wallet. This is based off of the work of SVK from Bitshares Blocks. He worked with the community to put together an alternative layout. Let us know what you think about it. We are always trying to improve the user experience.
What happened to Bitshares 2.0?
Bitshares 2.0. BitAssets 2.0 was tabled because of its complexity, and when compared to 3.0, it's not even worth thinking about anymore.
Sorry for the interruption. Thanks, and continue.
Well, this is a good time to remind you, if you are a new member here joining us today, you're welcome to ask questions openly. This is a kind of a town hall format that we do it because we're all a community, and the development team, including Bytemaster, have always been very open with the community, and it allows pretty much anybody to join up and ask whatever questions they want. Now, we're learning that sometimes we can't answer every question, so have patience. But with that said, I'll step out and let you get back to what you're talking about, Bytemaster.
All right, so last week we introduced the BitAssets 3.0 proposal. It's continued to be refined and discussed, and so far looks really solid. So we are moving forward with that. Some people ask some questions. It's going to exist in parallel with the old BitAsset system. If you like the current system and don't like the new system, if you like your current BitAssets, you can keep your current BitAssets. Yes, you can quote me quoting Obama there.
So these are going to run in conjunction, most likely, unless there's something unforeseen that comes up, pretty much indefinitely, right?
Well, it's up to the market to decide whether or not there's any value in BitAssets 1.0 in light of the 3.0. I think every market participant from shorts to longs is going to prefer the new system. liquidity on the old system will dry up and it'll basically be phased out. It might even be disabled with a hard fork at some point in the future if it's not being used.
That'll be more of like a cleaning up thing after it dries up and stops being used.
Right. That's all for the market to decide. I don't want to disrupt anyone's current positions.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
So we have to have a serious discussion as a community about the long-term prospects of Bitshares and what lessons we have learned over the past 4 months. So I'm curious what you all think have been the mistakes and how we can remedy them. I can share with you some of the things I think I've learned, and I'd love feedback on whether or not you think it's an accurate lesson or not. One of the very promising aspects of the Delegate system is that the blockchain can hire people, and those people can do work. And so far it's managed to hire about 30 people, and it's paying for some stuff to get done. The side effect that I've noticed is there's a ton of politics and infighting. It's been a very divisive feature, if you will. As powerful as it is, it's almost, it causes a lot of negativity. A lot of people are afraid of Bitshares because they're worried about the dilution that is going on with Bitshares. And so the question I had for you guys is the infighting and the politics worth the minuscule amount of dilution, or would the system be better off if we found an alternative to fund and sustain the network without doing the dilution?
Coming from somebody who uses the delegate pay, I would say obviously there's a bias there. But I guess it really depends on the kind. Like, what are we talking about? Is the delegated proof of stake protocol changing in some drastic way, or is there?
Exactly. I don't quite get the connection between the delegate system and dilution. You can have non-dilution with the delegate system, as far as I can understand.
Right. It's not the delegate system that's the problem. It's the dilution combined with it that's causes the problem, right? I think the delegate solution was well accepted when they were just paid transaction fees and they had a well-defined technical role. We made it more political and put more money on the table, right? You're spending other people's money. So that's caused some politics to enter the picture. And I've been told by some delegates that the hassle associated with campaigning and the hate they get on the forums and it's just not worth the minuscule pay they're getting these days. Some delegates have not been able to do much of anything. We've got a real problem in the current system where delegate pay is enough to pay for a few days worth of work for a developer. It's not enough to pay for someone full time. So if you give 100 people $1,000, you're going to get a lot less work done than if you give one person $100,000 over the course of a year. And we've sort of got that problem going on right now, is that we've got 100 people getting a small amount, and we're not able to get the concentration we need to make it happen. So,
refresh my memory, but before the merger, were the fees astronomically higher, so where the delegates could be paid a much higher fee based on fees alone, or was it at the merger that the dilution started funding delegates based on a different payout mechanism?
Prior to the introduction of dilution, the fees were enough to cover the hosting costs of the delegates, but mostly because of people registering assets and so forth. So the question asked is, well, we still need to fund development of the system, and this is where the referral system introduced by Max would, combined with raising fees, would potentially be game-changing. I think that the marketing delegates, if they were paid by the users they signed up versus, so we actually get a correlation between, the results you produced and your pay. Then you don't have to campaign for a slot. You sign up users, you get a revenue stream, and if you can sign them up for less than the lifetime value of the customer, then you profit. And that's a very neutral, non-political approach to the alternative. Is you pay somebody and they're going to get paid whether or not they produce results. And it's really hard to quantify. And someone who does 10 times as much as someone else gets paid the same. And that's kind of the moral economic dilemma we have.
Well, can I come at this from a slightly different angle? I mean, we're mentioning politics, and the politics of the situation, I've always looked at it as very interesting because most cryptocurrencies have their own kind of politics as well, right? But I don't consider it like a very fluid politics type of politics. The systems themselves aren't engineered like delegated proof of stake. So it makes it so they're not as agile. They have to form legitimately, they have to form foundations, and then there's centralization where they are trying to, for instance, with Bitcoin, they're trying to vote people in and out of office. And, it's largely become a very divisive thing in my perspective in the Bitcoin community. Most people were very upset about it. But with delegated proof of stake, I don't think that you're going to get rid of politics. I think the best thing you can do is give people a system where they can converge on the different things that they agree upon and act, as an opposing force when there are things that they disagree with, right?
I think there's degrees of politics. There's fighting over parameters and of the system, what the fees should be, what the block sizes should be. And then there's fighting over spending other people's money and taxation. And then there's deciding whether or not to kill someone, right? there are various levels of politics, and as you put more and more on the line to group control, politics get more and more divisive, and you have to concern yourself more with it. So I think that the delegated proof of stake model is the most effective and efficient model I've seen to date, that gives you the most decentralization for the lowest cost with the highest performance. I think that's perfectly fine on a technical level. So all we're really talking about is what would be the impact of removing that. Now, we could at any time remove the dilution with shareholder approval. So you just vote out the delegates that have 100% pay. So it seems that for now the shareholders are supporting the dilution in order to keep funding this thing. But just something to consider. I really bring it up because I think I've been working on a solution, a long-term solution to the viability of supporting our developers. And I'll be revealing the details of that over the course of the next couple months. Get some general discussion about what other things have we learned, and what should we aim to do better in the future.
I can see marketing getting paid by referrals, but there's some jobs I can't see getting paid by referrals, such as yours, Fuzzy, and public relations, as in press releases and that sort of thing. They're not going to have a large enough fund from referrals because they're doing a sort of a different job.
How about the model where you have a company like Coinbase, and Coinbase can be thought of as signing up all kinds of users for using Bitcoin, and Coinbase would be generating all the referral revenue if Bitcoin had a referral program. Coinbase and BitPay would be getting all kinds of referral income. Those companies would then hire the PR and the developers and the things like that. Blockchain.info is signing up all kinds of Bitcoin users. So they'd be advertising their service and getting money from the users they sign up. And so you don't have to hire the developers directly. These peripheral companies can hire the developers and hire marketers, and you market those businesses, and the side effect is the blockchain grows.
Doesn't that present a conflict of interest in that you can steer the development course by the nature of those businesses?
You can steer what gets funded by the nature of those businesses, but you cannot change blockchain rules or protocol without shareholder approval.
Gotcha, I understand.
So I would see it this way: if you have if you want to implement a gambling service on the blockchain, and you're going to have a gambling business, and you're going to refer all kinds of users based upon your gambling business, but you need blockchain support. You'd start a company, you'd implement a whole scripting environment, you'd submit it as a proposed patch with a hard fork, and if it's accepted, then you build your bit, and you have your website where you're driving everyone to use the blockchain for gambling, and you're making all kinds of money just because those features exist on the blockchain. So development of new features can be proposed by the community, funded by entrepreneurs who are looking to it, and then they can either get it integrated into the main blockchain with approval of the shareholders, or they can launch a competing blockchain if it doesn't get approval. But I think that the combined network effects are just so much stronger if you have a compelling referral system built in.
I agree with the referral idea, but that does kind of bring to mind the whole idea of notes and why they felt, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but I think you probably do, why they decided to have a separate blockchain rather than being a part of the existing Bitshares blockchain. Because it does, I mean, the whole idea of the merger was to not split allegiances and split your effort, whereas if you had it as part of the existing blockchain, then everybody wins.
Well, I'm trying to make the case to the Notes team that if we had a referral system, they could get all the financial benefits of driving their users to this platform without having to pay for all the costs of maintaining the network of their own. So they get combined network effects, and they basically get credit for all the marketing they can do. But the other reason why they're on a separate chain is the expectation of scalability. They don't want to be on a chain that is hindered there. So, as I mentioned in the past, we've really solved the scalability issue, and so with that plus the referral system, we can make a compelling argument that notes should be on the main blockchain, and that note holders can then be bought back with the revenue from the referral system.
That sounds good to me, and it makes logical sense.
So the interest that was otherwise going to go to, say, BitUSD holders and things like that would then be redirected toward this MLM campaign? Is that what's going on?
Effectively, transaction fees would be redirected to a referral campaign, and the transaction fees would be raised to be competitive. Basically, very similar to what Max outlined on the forum.
So this would incentivize people like blockchaininfo.info to work with Bitshares as well.
Yes, it would be able to fund Moonstone entirely. It would fund competing wallets entirely, which would solve all the user interface issues, all the user experience. Anyone who can make it easy for users to get into the system can make a ton of money. They basically own the system as far as revenues from the system go. If you sign up 90% of the users, you're getting 90% of all the transaction fees that network generates. So, yeah, there's going to be lots of competition to fight to bring in users.
One question that I have, and this is something it's not necessarily against this proposal of bringing notes in. It's more of a question in terms of, as I've noticed it, for instance, like Play, the tokens are different, are considered, since they're connected with games, they're going to most likely be considered something completely different than, say, something like Bitshares. And I don't know where notes stand in this, but being described as like collector's cards, kind of, for artist coins, right? I'm assuming that that's the type of route they're going in terms of regulation. Would bringing something like that into Bitshares then put those assets into a different class of investment? Or do we know?
What makes it a security or investment is not how it's accounted for or what platform it's on. It's what the issuer says it is and how they treat it. So it's just a shared database. That's all it is.
Without getting into all the details of the MLM scheme, is it truly MLM? Because I remember reading in the thread earlier that there was a number of different proposals, and at one point it was more of a multi-tiered type of thing, and then there was another one that curtailed the levels to maybe only 1 or 2 levels. Where does the thinking of that stand at this point?
It's not multi-level. It's not even. We'll be releasing the details of what we're actually doing. We're trying to prepare all the stuff there. But the general idea is that you make money by bringing users to the system and signing them up. Direct
and not a cascaded thing to where you can sign up down level people and you start getting the benefits of what their work is. That's good. I like the straight approach much better.
You can't do down levels on a blockchain because then you just create in down levels for yourself. So a blockchain can't. There are limits on what we can do in a decentralized manner without identity verification.
It's really, I think it's a great idea. I wouldn't implement it overnight. These are the types of things, to me, I'm interested to hear other people's opinions, but these are the types of things that would be good to have press releases and to talk about it. We're going to build up to it like it's a big event, and have that have maybe a month out, people know this is going to change in a month. That gives the delegates time to figure out how they're going to deal with whatever they got to deal with. And, also gives you the opportunity to kind of hype it, especially since Ken Code's running around like a chicken with his head cut off, grabbing journalists all over the place.
Well, we're definitely much more organized on that front going forward, so you can expect that anything we do going forward is going to be implement and then announce with a press release and lots of fanfare rather than announce and then figure out how to implement it.
And speaking of Ken Code and what he's been doing lately, the whole DNS approach was discussed and said, well, that's something we can do after the 1.0 release. Well, with 1.0 kind of shifting and changing, where does DNS fit into the thinking of our future plans? I know you don't need to get into any detail. I just want some generalities here.
All I've got to say is this summer is going to surprise a lot of people for the positive.
Very well. Thank you.
You're familiar with, well, I don't know if everybody here is familiar with him, but C.W. Evans.
Charles Evans?
Yes. Did anybody get the chance to read the article that interviewed him?
I saw it, but didn't read it.
Well, the reason I ask is it's kind of along the lines of a question that's here. And I know that we're on a different topic, but LuckyBit and some people in the actual question section for your thread they were talking about bringing him back in. Do you guys keep in contact with him and still talk to him, or?
Well, we've been too busy since he left. He had his own project that he was working on outside of cryptocurrency, so I haven't kept in contact with him.
Sure. Sorry about that. I just wanted to ask that question real quick.
Hey, speaking on the Delegate pay, I had an idea, I'm just throwing it out there about how, the referral thing is great, that's cool, I like that, but I was just wondering, it's just the basic Delegate pay system where, we have the different rates of, the free, well, people set their own rate, but pretty much 3% for a regular Delegate, and that's fine, but I was thinking for distinction out maybe like projects or people as far as their Delegate pay, how about, and I don't know how technical this is to implement, just throw it out there, like perhaps, of course we have a flat rate for the basic technical delegates, but then say somebody has a proposal or there's an employee and everybody votes on that proposal, and if it goes through, then we just pull like 1% from each of the delegates, and that becomes the 100% pay rate for that particular project or delegate. So that you can kind of vote on projects depending of the technical delegates. So I'm not sure how hard that is to implement. And if the project fails, something like that, then you just downvote it, and that 1%.
And the 1% comes off of each delegate?
Basically, the idea is the delegates could pool their funds to fund a project if it had stakeholder approval. We can obviously do that voluntarily right now, but yeah, there's lots of things like that. Projects are tough. Making group decisions is very tough. I'm starting to think that we need to get the blockchain to be as neutral of a platform as possible and make all the profit money-making opportunities exist on peripheral services around the blockchain rather than making the blockchain pay for things. If you have an idea for some project that's going to make a lot of money, it's going to make a lot of money by doing one of two things. It's either going to drive a lot of users to us, or it's going to have ads and traffic. Basically, you're going to make money by driving users. And if you have something like that, it's a good idea. You can invest and make it a success and keep the profits. Whereas right now, we've got everyone has to try to assess, well, does this project make money? And the reality is most efforts are not sure wins. It's really hard to say if it's actually worth what you're paying for it, and the people taking the risk are all the shareholders, and the people who get hired to do it take no risk on their own idea. So I think we need to realign incentives and avoid the group trap as much as possible. So that's where I'm leaning.
I actually very much agree with, bringing back to the protocol level. There was a conversation I had with Hack Fisher at one point in time, and when we were talking about politics, which inevitably happens when we talk about blockchain technology, right? One of the foundations of why it even exists today is very political. He stated that they're trying to think of it in terms of a neutral protocol that everything else is built around. And when he said that to me, it really kind of clicked a light on in my head. But I didn't really recognize at the time the connection to this project. It is very interesting. I'd be interested to see what people think in terms of, we do have infrastructure like in our current society that is taxed, like it's paid for by taxes, and that most everybody agrees upon it. Now, the question is that necessary or not? And if it is necessary, then are we going to have public services? That's the kind of the question that I would be asking. And if so, how would we accomplish that, or would we not need to?
I look at it like roads. There's two ways to pay for roads. One is with tolls, and the other is with taxes. I very much prefer the private roads paid for by tolls, especially because we have the technology to make the tolls completely automatic and not impact traffic flow. The problem we have, of course, is with roads is that it's a monopoly and regulated, and the government basically owns all the roads, so you don't have competition or other things to regulate the market there. But when it comes to a blockchain, your options are to either pay the people that are running the infrastructure through transaction fees or dilution. And I think that the cost needs to be borne by those who are causing the cost to occur. Those who are making transactions need to pay for the infrastructure that allows those transactions to be possible. And those who are not using anything should not have to pay. And that allows all the economics and stuff to work out so that people economize on resource usage. So we definitely want all infrastructure to be paid for with tolls, or transaction fees, and to have a neutral platform, a platform that doesn't favor one person's pet idea about how it should be marketed or one person's approach over another. Because anytime you pick one project, someone's going to be pissed off about it, and that causes everyone, it divides the community. Whereas if we had a protocol where you're not trying to decide who should get money, then the community can be united on blockchain neutrality, if you will. And then all we have to do is have the blockchain configured to reward those who actually bring us business, who basically cause there to be transactions.
What role does voting play in determining the direction of things and our activities going forward? I know that voting has been a big deal in the past, and even what you're doing here, you're kind of taking an informal poll of our thinking about various things moving forward. And I'm wondering whether or not we should put more mechanisms in place to where this can be a little more formalized. It may not be formalized to the extent that it sets firmly the direction, but at least it allows you to get information on a more reliable level from a broader scope, a broader group of the community than what we can do with these types of things.
I think the main way we have for polling right now is to run trial delegates and try to get them elected and see how much state can get behind them. So if we can discuss a proposed plan of action or a proposed philosophy, say, hey, vote for this delegate to express your opinion on this matter. That's the main tool we have right now to get shareholder opinion. And I think I'd like to use that going forward to see what people think. As far as long term, I think the primary thing you want delegates to be deciding are things like block sizes, block intervals, transaction fees, and any other pertinent non-monetary parameters in the system. We don't want any constant we have in the code becomes a potential point of inflexibility, and we definitely need the ability to adapt as technology matures. We should adapt without changing the rules. We just change some of these parameters through stakeholder approval. And I think that would formalize the process that Bitcoin, right now Bitcoin's trying to figure out, should they increase block sizes? And they have the whole foundation, this campaigning and things like that, trying to figure out what to do. And eventually someone's going to create a hard fork that does it, and the miners are going to vote by whether or not they upgrade. I think those are the type of things that should be voted on, and it should be relatively infrequent, because that's very different. That's sort of like using the road analogy, or vote on the speed limit that people are allowed to have.
You mentioned a delegate voting on transaction fees. Well, that's a monetary policy, and that's something that everybody in the community, of course, has a vested interest in. So it needs to even be broader. That's more of a shareholder voting process in terms of setting transaction fees, but it needs to have delegate input because they're the ones that have the technical basis for what's necessary. And so that would be my take on transaction fees.
Yes, transaction fees are a monetary thing. It's like any business, someone has to be responsible for setting prices. So we can't just set it to zero, and we can't set it too high. And
delegates need to be involved.
Right. Delegates aren't going to run nodes if they're not compensated for their time and resources. So the stakeholders will have to say, all right, well, if we're going to have a viable business, we're going to have to charge enough to pay the delegates. And that's the minimum. And then the stakeholders say, well, if we just pay the delegates enough, then we're not going to get the growth we need. So we need to actually raise fees enough to cover both the cost of delegates and the cost of user acquisition. And we need a business model that is sustainable from a revenue perspective. If it's not sustainable, then we don't have a viable business.
Now, there could be two separate aspects, though. I mean, having new users brought into the system may not be under the umbrella of what the delegates are responsible for. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but those are separate things that could be funded through totally separate transaction fees and therefore voted separately, whether or not it's the shareholders' input versus the delegates' input to direct them or control them.
Well, I think that the shareholders should set delegate pay, and they should set any referral pay. And I agree, it's not just one thing, and they are separate. So you're on the right track that we need to have the stakeholders responsible for negotiating with the various parties. You need to negotiate with those who are bringing us customers, and you need to negotiate with those who are providing the infrastructure, and you need to negotiate with the customers who are using your service. You got to do a three-way negotiation there, and the shareholders are responsible for trying to balance what the fees are that the customers pay. That's one negotiation, and how to divide those fees between the referral system and the delegate infrastructure.
Why not have something kind of just like it used to be, like PTS is now, where you can have different, as a delegate, I can increase my own fees, the percentage of fees, and people can vote me in based on the fees that I charge. So you'll naturally have people showing up trying to give the lowest fees, which will encourage people to actually continue transacting on the network.
Yeah, well, I'll be putting together a detailed proposal on all of this stuff. I just wanted to gather as much feedback from the community so that I can incorporate it into what I'm doing beforehand.
Is there anybody here from the Chinese community who could kind of help relay this to the Chinese community? If not, I'll get in touch with BTS Wild Pig and see what we can do. But this would be huge for the Chinese community, especially because the people who were the most upset by we know technically it's not really dilution, but the people who were upset by the very small amount of dilution that is in existence right now, they were mostly on the Chinese side.
I have a question about how development would be funded. Is it going to require the use of a foundation to manage the funds?
Development should be funded entirely through entrepreneurial efforts of private organizations outside the blockchain. So imagine if all the developers started working for blockchain.info, and we make all of our money and pay all the salaries by providing that service.
So you're incentivizing the current developers to then reach out and start working for other companies that would then turn around and use and implement our blockchain technology.
Right. I'm looking at putting together a company that's able to do that and specializes in taking advantage of the fact that blockchain exists to make money and raising money for that company to make all this stuff possible because that company have a business model that should be viable without depending upon the blockchain to dilute.
So you would still be able to do the core functionality of the blockchain stuff that you're doing right now, but you'd be doing it as a separate company that has its own business model.
I think that blockchain protocols gain a lot of value from stability and from not changing very often and from just being predictable. We've sort of been changing Bitshares a whole lot over the past year with lots and lots of pivots. And the protocol is constantly changing. There's hard forks. The rules are changing. I want to get away from that. I want a protocol that does what it needs to do, is well-defined, and doesn't need to change for long periods of time. And people have said it before, we are not going to get new users and adoption and see success simply by adding more and more features. That's only 1/3 of the problem. The other 2/3 are acquiring users and getting it out there. So and a lot of the money is to be made on the acquiring users side of things. So that's where I want to focus. And I would like the protocol to be something that is robust enough that it can last as long as Bitcoin has lasted without having to do significant updates. I'm not saying that it should never change. Obviously, these things need to change, but it should be more of a slow, steady process, kind of like upgrading the standardization for a programming language, right? Every 5 years, after much peer review, there is one carefully crafted, widely accepted update that is implemented with lots of advanced warning. Those are the ways that these things should be operated. This is a financial product. The financial implications of every single change are huge. Companies are depending upon stability so that they can plan. What we have right now with Bitshares is sort of like a government that changes the regulations every couple of months. No businesses will form in an environment like that because they don't know what the regulations will be in a couple of months, and if the regulations change, it could impact the viability of their entire business model. And that is entirely too much risk that is outside the control of the businessmen, and therefore the businesses don't get started. So we need to establish a protocol that is 1.0, that is not going to be changing and does everything we need it to do for the foreseeable future. And then commit to that. And only by doing that will businesses have the confidence to start building and making investments in infrastructure.
Hey, Bytemaster, I apologize if this question has been asked already. I got here a little late. But what you're talking about with the delegate dilution and having alternatives to help phase that out, is this something that you foresee eliminating the possibility from the protocol, or is something that will just gradually be phased out as the voters decide, okay, we don't need to vote these 100% or whatever percentage dilution delegates in anymore because everyone has this other opportunity over here to make money?
I'm interested in feedback on that approach. I'm going to carefully consider all the feedback before I make any recommendations.
LuckyBit asks a question here in terms of, and I think this is going back to when you were talking about slow and steady changes. It's something that doesn't need changed very often. He's saying, what if the technology forces dramatic changes? Like if a new innovation appears. And he's saying plugins and extensions, though I think that those are already going to be functional in the Moonstone wallet. So that's just the question.
Ideally, the protocol should be as extensible as possible without requiring hard forking changes. Making Turing-complete scripts is one example that gets you a long way toward not needing to do updates very frequently. But we have some other things that are a little bit easier to do than Turing-complete scripting that will go a long way toward allowing application layer developers to do things without us having to change the core protocol.
Do you think that Vote is going to have as much power in the ecosystem? Do you think it's going to be as valuable to the ecosystem with this type of implementation?
I think Vote has been a driving factor for trying to get the referral system figured out. So Vote is going to be a whole lot more viable with the proper referral system.
So they could actually make money off of referring people to Bitshares through the actual voting platform.
Exactly.
It seems in my mind it's kind of like the peer tracks model in a way, like all these third-party businesses are going to kind of plug into the blockchain, and they're going to benefit highly from also promoting the products that they are using, which would be bit assets in the background, right?
Sorry, I missed some of that.
I'm just saying it seems kind of like how peer tracks whenever Talon has spoken in the past, he said, PeerTracks is the front end for just PeerTracks. There's going to be many others that would grow on, that would plug into the Note blockchain, essentially. And they would all have their own business models and would compete against each other, utilizing the underlying technology.
Yes.
And this is pretty much what naturally has already happened with Bitcoin and a couple of the really big cryptocurrencies. So I guess we have a history that shows that this is what naturally happens.
Yep. I'd like to wrap this up, so if there's any last things to handle.
Nope. There's been mostly conversation around the BitAssets 3.0 proposal this week, and maybe a couple other things, but we've covered, I think, probably the most important stuff we could have covered this week. Unless anybody else has something that they'd like to say or a question that they'd like to ask, I think we can probably stop this.
If transaction fees are going to go to referrers and to the development, how is the blockchain going to be profitable?
It depends on how much the blockchain wants to burn. That's another parameter that needs to be figured out by the shareholders.
Well, I think this would probably be a good place to end it, and I'm going to try to find a public fountain where I can get some pennies so I can buy some more Bitshares.